Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. This is Tiger. Welcome to... And please heed what the game is telling you in the beginning every time. We are just doing stuff for the simulator on your PC. We are not driving trains in the real world, and this is totally not what we are talking about here. We are just trying to make the experience on the simulator to feel a bit more like the real thing by investigating how the real thing would be and what you would have to do there. Hey AJ, and hey CD Radar, that is great to have you back on the stream 3 times in a row for the long awaited ETCS part 1 stream. We have to go back to Luzern Sursee, and we will have to look at a lot of theory and stuff today, so let's just jump in to one service that I picked where we can see what Rivet Games simulated us for ETCS level 0. What did I pick? 1235. Then let's take the 1235 train maybe. Let's do it in summer with light clouds. Oh, no, not foggy. Light clouds. And see what weather we get. We have talked about this before. The Luzern Sursee DLC is so far the first and only DLC where we can see ETCS, European Train Control System, in action, or at least some of it. We are going in this service from Sursee to Luzern. We have to set up our Stadler Flirt train by switching on our command stand, putting the reverser to forward, and then maybe we can have some train lights for the passengers. Can already close the doors. Since we are running a fast service, we will run as Regionalexpress Basel SBB, and then we turn on with button 9 the ETCS level 0, confirm it with the ETCS acknowledge, and then we can already go. What I wanted you to pay attention to is what Rivet simulated us for ETCS level 0, what in my opinion is quite a fictitious mode. We will talk about that later in the presentation. So far what Rivet promises us is that they monitor the speed limit starting at 100 kilometers and above. Below that we can run the speed limit as happily as we want, and nothing will happen. So I switched on the ETC level 0. We can see here very small but still ETC level 0. We can see we are warned about reduction in speed limit to 100 while we are in a speed limit of 60, a track limit of 60. I tried to brake and violate the speed limit of 60 here already. It will end as soon as the whole train is out of the switch, but now we are already over. You can see we are violating the speed limit already, but nothing happens. ETCS 0 does not intervene. We are not getting points for it. Here the signal reduction to 100 starts because we will be going across a switch, and now let's see what happens if the simulated ETCS level 0 will control us to this 100 signal speed. So I will deliberately try to be too fast. Here is the switch. We're switching over and chuck! We got stopped. So we can see, even though well, we tried to violate the speed limit of 100 on the switch, what is signal speed limit, and at the same time the track limit, and what happened as soon as we got a few ticks above the 100, the simulated level 0 here in the train stopped us short. And you could see this red indicator coming on, and what you can also see is it is recovering totally on its own. I didn't do anything, I just had the combined lever in max, and we got a penalty brake, got stopped to a standstill, and then without doing anything the train reset and we recovered, and we can go on. Now we are in a track limit of 160. Since this is the max speed of the train anyway, and this limiter here won't allow us to go significantly faster than 160 anyway, we can't really violate this to see what the system is doing. But so far it is doing what Rivet Games promised. They are controlling us in the speed segment of 100 and higher. And what does it do as soon as we violate it without any warning, without much ado? It just applies a self-recovering penalty brake. Without spoiling too much, I don't think that there is any ETCS level or mode of operation that has those characteristics. In real life we will see that on the presentation. All that ETCS level 0 is supposed to do is to control the maximum speed that the train can go, and this is the 160 here. And obviously, because there is no way on this train with this limiter to go significantly above the 160, we would have never seen that in action. In real life you would be able to punch in a lower speed limit for the train that ETCS level 0 controls you to, but we can't do this in the game. So let's get our train, our express train, to the first stop at Sempach-Neuenkirch. Again we will see what happens when we get into the speed reduction of 125 before we get to the station, and how the ETCS level 0 is reacting. Here is the announcement of the reduction to 125. Very soon we will get to the execution sign for the speed limit of 125. We are still running way above that limit, and here, woof, we pass the execution sign. You can see in this red indicator here that the penalty brakes have been applied, and then the train comes to a standstill. You can see it on the manometer here, 5.5 bar. That is about what the brake cylinders can take. And then let's just watch if the train recovers on its own. We come to a standstill. The red indicator goes out. The pressure goes out of the brake cylinders. The lever is still in, no, it's in 0 now because I was coasting, and I can just resume the drive. So this is the self-recovering penalty brake that we see here. And that is about what ETCS level 0 in the implementation here in the game is doing. As soon as you are going a few ticks above the speed limit of 100 or above, you will get a penalty brake. Below 100 and above, you can violate the speed limit as hard as you want. Nothing will happen. And the penalty brake will be applied either if you are accelerating beyond an existing speed limit, or if you are getting a reduction in speed limit and are not reacting to it. Here's the reduction to 120. Doesn't really bug us. Also the Eurosignum system that was warning us about yellow signals and stuff is not active in the level 0 as implemented here. We had this on the stream 2 weeks ago, how it works with the Level STM. So just come to a nice stop here in Sempach-Neuenkirch, and then let's have a look on the presentation about what ETCS is about and how those levels are actually connected and what we see of it in the game. Presentation time. Brace yourself, sit back in your chairs, get a cup of coffee. There is a lot of stuff that we have to go through today. The regulatory framework of ETCS, the European Train Control System, doing exactly that, including the coffee, what AJ said on the chat. That's a good idea. Well, so far we have been talking about national train control systems. It was quite obviously who was implementing them, the national railways or the big railway carriers in their own area. ETCS, who is actually inventing ETCS and who are the players who are constructing this stuff? Where does it come from? Is it something that was invented in Switzerland, or was it something that was invented in Europe at all? Let's have a look who the players are. One of the players is the UIC, that you know, obviously. That is the International Union of Railways. That is one organization for all the railway carriers in the world. Everyone who runs a railway carrier can be a member of the International Union of Railways, the UIC, the Union Internationale de Chemin de Fer, and those are the guys who run the trains. And on the other hand, ice coffee, good thing. And on the other hand, have to buy the trains and all the signaling stuff and safety control stuff, hardware and signals and what you build in the tracks. On the other hand, there is the UNIFE, the Union Internationale de Union des Industries Ferroviaires Européennes, if I make so bold and try to pronounce it in French, the European Rail Supply Industry Association. So those are the guys who build the trains and build the train control stuff and the signals, and on the other hand sell it. So here are the sellers, here are the buyers. And obviously we have the European Union. This is the state, the guys who make the law. And those three parties more or less have to come together to make something big as a European train control system, because what is the idea? In the many countries in Europe there are a lot of different train control systems, about like close to 20 or something when they started out with making the ETCS. And the idea obviously is that you have one system that works in all those countries, so that a train that is running from Rotterdam to Genova, for example, doesn't need to be able to understand Dutch and Belgian and Luxembourgian and French and German and Swiss and Italian or maybe Austrian train control systems, but that it can run in one train control system the whole way. And this is the idea. The European Union obviously acts through the European Commission. What is the government in the European Union, if you want it like this? And governments usually act through agencies for special areas. And here there is the European Union Agency for Railways, the ERA. That is more or less the equivalent what you have the FRA in the United States, for example. So there are typically agencies that belong to the government that are responsible for all the regulations that concern railway things and how safe a railway has to be, and they make the regulation, the law that tells you what kind. Good old simple Europe, yeah. And this is the regulation that tell you what there needs to be and regarding safety stuff to run trains, to be allowed to sell trains and run trains. And the UIC and the UNIFE, they started out to make an European rail traffic management system, and that is more or less the roof for the ETCS. That is the idea of creating something that unifies all the regulatory stuff, all the systems, all the hardware, so that you can more or less run a train through Europe without the train having to speak all the different languages in train control. And under that roof of ERTMS, the European Rail Traffic Management System, one main stock is the ETCS, the European Train Control System, that is developed inside this ERTMS. This is why you sometimes read the acronym ERTMS more or less as a synonym for ETCS. But it is not all. ETCS and ERTMS, the GSM-R, the Global System for Mobile Communications Railway, the radio system for the modern trains. It is a system that is developed under that roof as well. So the ETCS and on the other side the GSM-R, what you see in your British trains in the game all the time, those typical GSM-R radio devices on your trains that don't really work, that sometimes display something weird. But in real life, train drivers actually rely a lot on GSM-R, even if there is no other element of the ERTMS implemented on their railways. And for developing the ETCS, more or less the most important members of the UNIFE, they created a consortium, what is the UNISIG, the Union of the Signaling Industry. So, and those are the guys who are building the standards for ETCS. While on the other hand, to give a legal framework to that whole process, the European Union has issued a lot of directives. Directives are, well, one of the forms of law that is issued in the European Union, and the latest of those directives is this directive that I have numbered here. And this directive more or less says everyone who wants to sell train stuff, train and signals and train control stuff, has to comply with certain technical specifications for interoperability, the TSI. And those are issued by the ERA, by the European Union Agency for Railways. So they say how trains and train control systems have to be built, that they actually qualify for interoperability. And then it obviously makes sense that this is coordinated, that those guys are developing their ERTMS stuff and their ETCS stuff in accordance with those technical specifications for interoperability. So those guys are more or less sitting at the same table and are developing this. And we have the three main interests: the guys who want to sell the train control stuff and their trains, the guys who have to buy it to run their trains, and the guys who have to make sure that the customers are safe on the rail travels. So that is more or less the playing field and the players that develop the ETCS. And then the UNISIG for the ETCS, they develop certain system requirement specifications. This is more or less the stuff that tells you how the system has to work in accordance to the technical specifications for interoperability, and those come in different versions. The first version was more or less issued in 1989 or 1999. 1998, 1999, but it is outdated now. This is nothing that is still in operation anymore, and then you can see through the years they updated and implemented more stuff, and they were more or less coming up with a version that is now called the Baseline 2. It has the code SRS 2.3.0 for D, with the D what I have read meaning for debugged, what is always an extremely dangerous thing to name a version of your stuff debugged, but that is what it is called. And this is the baseline 2. This is a version that is still in operation on a lot of trains, but it did not stop here. The baseline 3 was developed in the years after that with the maintenance release 1 and the release 2 with those version numbers, so you can see that they wrote the numbers ahead, and you have more or less 2 versions of the ETCS stuff that are still in use, and to distinguish which of them runs on your network or on your train, you have the baseline 2 and the baseline 3. They are more or less the same, but not everything is the same, and in the presentation here, to distinguish between stuff that only applies to baseline 2, I have this red 2, and for baseline 3 I have this red, the blue 3, to distinguish that. Also for the GSM-R, there are baselines since 2015 and 2016, and this is the stuff that is actually implemented. In the future, this process won't stop, more or less. There is a TSI, a Technical Specifications for Interoperability 2022, that came into force at the beginning of this year, 2023, and when you read about it in the internet, people are speculating whether this may lead to a baseline 4 being issued. So this process does not stop. While at the other hand, people are getting cold feet investing into this system that includes the GSM-R stuff, because you can see this takes time and technical things get outdated, and the UIC are already developing a more advanced radio system that may at some point in time supplement or will replace the GSM-R stuff. It goes under the acronym FRMCS, Future Railway Mobile Communication System. So obviously those guys who have to run the trains, they don't want to buy new trains and new train control stuff and new signals and new track side equipment every 10 years, because that is fragging expensive. Even to update your train from one version of ETCS software to the next costs a lot of money, because you have to get it certified, and the certification process costs a lot of money. So yeah, you can see it has a life of its own, this process, and it must have, because it's a big thing to unify it for the whole of Europe. And obviously there are different interests that are working in that field. So I hope you don't think that I wasted your time with this, but I wanted to show you who the players are, where it comes from, and what more or less is the process of developing ETCS, and how you can, where you can put it if some source is talking about baseline 2 or baseline 3, and what that means. The next thing I wanted to take a look at is what your train actually has on board to make it, to enable it to run ETCS, the European Train Control System. So I sketched a train, or at least a cab, front end of a train. And what do we have on it? We have, and this is the core of everything, the EVC, the European Vital Computer, also called the EuroCab. That is the computer that processes all the data and runs the system, more or less. And every computer that has to do something needs some input and some output, so it needs to be connected. It is connected with the driver via the driver-machine interface, formerly known as the man-machine interface, and then people realized that there are also women driving trains, so they renamed it into driver-machine interface. And this is more or less the display and a couple of buttons that you can press so that the driver can interact with the computer. Then it has an interface to interact with the train, so the computer can get info from the train about what the train is doing, how it is doing, if the engine is running, if something broke or whatever. So this connects the computer to the train. Then the computer has a connection to the GSM-R radio, it also called the Euro radio, and this can connect with obviously outside sources via radio waves, and it can also connect the driver with speech to the signaler, for example. So he can, in a very, very classic way, telephone the signaler via the GSM-R Euro radio. Then the computer needs a device that it can pick up the information that is provided by the track transponders, the balises and Euro loops, and this is called the BTM, the balise transmission module. Then the train has other things that are more or less charged to determine how far the train moved since the last balise that he picked up, and for that it has odometry equipment, that is rotation counters for calculating how often the wheels turned, and then with multiplying it with the circumference of the wheel, the train can calculate how far it went. And accelerometers and Doppler radars, this is my representation of a Doppler radars, and so the train tries to figure out how far it went since the last point where it knew where it was, because we all know one big part of navigation is to know where you are, and the train and the computer, they want to know where they are, and this is why they have this odometry stuff. Then there is an event recorder called the judicial recording unit, what is obviously not so important for operating the train, but very important if you want to see after an accident what went wrong. So this is connected with the computer, often built into the same rack, but is a separate unit. And this has a different color. What is it? A specific transmission module. This is actually not something that is genuinely ETCS, but it is more or less for the time until everything is ETCS hardware, because this specific transmission module or modules are able to pick up legacy train control transponders like the PZB magnets in Germany, for example, and feed it into the EuroCab computer. So this makes the EuroCab more or less downward compatible in a way, so that the legacy systems, or they are called Class B systems in the ETCS language, can be used in a way by an ETCS train. And for that it needs a specific transmission module, or more of them, if it wants to be able to understand PZB and Eurosignum and whatever train control system that the train is supposed to understand. So it is a bit like the Rucksack, the Eurobalise transmission module that we had on the last stream, that the older trains that don't run to ETCS equipment got packed on so that they can understand the BTM modules and the Eurosignum system that was simulated on top of it, but it is actually a device that enables the modern ETCS EuroCab train to understand the old legacy Class B train control transponders. Yeah, now we have our stuff that we have on the train. Make it a bit smaller, it's still the same stuff, it's still the same train, but have a look what we have on the track to correspond with that. Obviously, and this is legacy stuff, this is why it is green in my presentation, we have the color light signals in most of the systems that we are running, so all the old signaling is obviously still there at the moment. What we are building in the track to make it compatible with ETCS are those Eurobalises, those little transponders that look a bit like, well, iPads from the format and from the size here, that are set in the track, and often they are painted yellow. This is why I painted them yellow, and those are supposed to communicate with the train by being picked up by this balise transmission module, by the BTM. And there are two kinds of those balises, the fixed data balises and the infill balises. Fixed data balises always transpond the same telegram, the same data. By, for example, an fixed data balise can tell the train, hello, I am balise number so-and-so, and in 1.6 kilometers there will be a speed reduction from 80 to 60. Obviously much more data will be transferred, but this would be something that is static. So the speed reduction, the reduction in track speed happens there in this distance all the time, and so the data is fixed and the train picks it up. At the moment the train picks up the balise, it knows exactly where it is, because the position of this balise with that number hello is part of every telegram. Yeah, necessarily so, because it has to wake up the train. Bang, wake up, here is transponder so and so. Yeah, and then the train knows exactly where it is, because it knows where transponder number so and so is located in the map, and from that on it can calculate its position with the odometry stuff that it has on board. On the other hand, infill balises can transpond data like, well, hello, I am transponder number so and so, and the signal in a distance of 230 meters is green at the moment, for example. And this is actually obviously information that changes. Yeah, the stuff that is transferred by the data balises is obviously only punctual. It happens in an instant, and then the train has moved on, and it got a data jerked into the system, and it can work with it. Euroloops are transponders as well, but they can transpond the data continuously over a certain length of track. Like typically it is limited to a length of about 1 kilometer and is installed in front of a signal, so that while approaching the signal, if the aspect on the signal changes, then the train can know that the signal changed its aspect and act accordingly. So those two thingies are the track installations under ETCS, the Eurobalises and the Euroloops. And that the infill balises actually get some data filled in. They are connected with a so-called lineside electronic unit, the LEDU, and this is connected with the signal, and it is connected with the interlocking signal control, whatever there is in your national system, the guys who control the signals, the dispatcher, the signaler, whatever this guy or those guys or this system may be called. It can also be an automatic system, like a train control center or whatever, that controls everything automatically, but this is not part of the ETCS. This is part of the national train control and how to handle and how to rig that stuff. This is why it is green, because it is not ETCS stuff, but it is legacy stuff, more or less. Yeah, and this interlocking is also connected to a radio block center in RBC, and this radio block center can talk to the train via the GSM-R radio. It can send data, it can exchange data with the computer, and it can also talk to the driver on the radio. So, looking at this, we know that the train can pick up data, not only static data, but also variable data about signal aspects and so on, through the balises, through the radio, and with all that data it can actually build a cab signaling system, so that the driver can see everything that is happening on his or her display in the cab. And this is the idea, that with all those installations there comes a cab signaling system that leads the driver through everything without the need of trackside signals anymore. The only thing that we still have to divide the track into blocks are those block markers with this arrow that is always pointing towards the track that it belongs to. And this is quite like the block markers in the TVM 430 system that we all know from riding our Javelin. And we made a video about this, so if you want to learn more about the TVM 430 system and riding the Javelin along it, then you are very much invited to watch this video, and we will have a corresponding video sometime in this year when we are driving the TGV with the original French version of the TVM 430, not the system that is running in the United Kingdom, what is more or less the same but has slightly different block markers. So these block markers belong to the cab signaling system. And what we still have in our tracks is the legacy system stuff. Like in German system, we still have the 500 Hertz, the 2000 Hertz magnet, and somewhere over there the 1000 Hertz magnets that belong to the PZB installations. And all those national train control system, PZB, Integra Signum, AWS, TPWS, Crocodile, KVB in France, all this stuff is called a Class B installation in ETCS language. So all those legacy systems are referred to as Class B systems. And those, this is the stuff, right? So we have the new ETCS hardware, the old train control hardware, our signals, and those ways of communication. And if you look at this, then there are more or less three main ways of communicating or communication between the signaler and the driver on the train. This is why I called the next slide channels of communication. Let's have a driver on the train. ETCS, we understand that too, is still based on the idea that there is a driver on the train. It is not an automatic train operation system, at least not at the moment, but we are still working on the idea that there is a driver on the train. And so I put her here into the cab. And how does the interlocking signal control can communicate with our driver on the train? The most traditional way is through the signals. The interlocking sets the signal aspects, or they are set in a way automatically, but according to certain rules, and the driver, she sees the aspect with her eyes and can react to it. At the same time, also very basic, the interlocking control, the signaler can talk to the driver on the radio. Typically after something unforeseen happened, the driver can ask, what am I supposed to do? I'm here and this happened, and then they can figure out what can be done. So this is the very, very classic channel 0 that we had already before ETCS. The next way of communication, now in pink here, is through the balises, especially through the infill balises, because the signaler can set the data that gets fed into those balises, and by that means the train picks up the data and feeds it into its computer. Also it picks up the fixed data from the fixed data balises and processes it and displays the necessary information for the driver to see on her display. So she does no longer necessarily need to look at the signals in the outside world. That can be hard to see if there is fog, if there is a house or a tree standing in front of it, or if the windscreen wipers are broken or whatever. She only needs to look at her display and gets all the necessary information here. So this is the channel 1 that I wanted to introduce here. And then we have our GSM-R radio. So the most simple way is that we don't only call the driver if there is an emergency or something unforeseen happened, but we can have a constant communication on the data line between the train computer and the computers running in the signal control. And for positioning, so that the train actually knows exactly where it is, we still use the fixed data balises, so that the train positions itself and always corrects the position that the odometry system calculates where it is most likely, and so it gets positioning data from those fixed data balises especially, and this is fed again into the display, and the driver can see it on the display. So this will be the channel 2 that is still running here. And yeah, ETCS and its different levels is more or less built on those different channels of communication. Let's start with level 0, what we are working on here, and at the same time what is level STM that we had in the stream 2 weeks ago, where we just used the legacy system, as we now know, the class B system, Eurosignum over ETCS level STM. What are we using in the level 0 of ETCS? Actually, we are not using a lot of the ETCS stuff. This is why it is called level 0. We are not actually using the balises, we disconnect them. We are still using the trackside signals that are there. So let's move out the balises and Euroloops. We're also not using the radio block center, we only using the radio for telephoning the driver in case of something happened or whatever, not for chatting with her, but only for the necessary talk. And this obviously does not allow any cap signaling anymore, because the train, especially the computer, does not get the data about what the signal status is. Then we don't need block markers, but we still have a driver. The communication works with the signals shown on the wayside. The driver still sees the signal and has to react accordingly. We still keep the line open that she can telephone or radio the signaler, and obviously not all the drivers can radio the signaler at the same time, so this has to be limited to emergencies or certain unforeseen situations. What the ETCS level 0 can do is, we had this when we were driving our train, it can actually monitor the maximum speed that is punched in for this specific type of train. So if the computer knows my train under all circumstances, regardless of what the signals show or what the track limits are, it can never exceed a speed of 140 or 160, then this is the speed that level 0 will control the train to. And the second thing that ETCS level 0 can do, it can read temporary balises and display them on the display. What is a temporary balise? Just imagine there is construction on the track and there is a temporary speed reduction because the driver has to pass the construction site slower than the usual track speed limit would. Then you can place a temporary balise there, telling the train, hello, I am temporary balise number so and so, and there is a temporary reduction of 240 in 600 meters or whatever. So this is what ETCS level 0 can do: read the temporary balises and monitor the maximum allowed speed for the vehicle. So the driver, she can see the signaling aspects on the signals, and she can see the information from the temporary balises on her display. On her display, level 0 will be displayed like this. There is always on the left side an indicator for what level we are running at, and on the other hand, on the right side more, there is an indicator for the mode of operation that we are operating under. And sometimes those two things get mixed up, but they are actually two different concepts. You have the level of ETCS that the train is actually working on. That is, we will see that mainly connected with the way how the information get into the train. And the mode of operation is on what information the driver can rely, if she has to watch the trackside signals or not. And there are a lot of special modes of operation. So some modes of operation are limited to a certain level, but most of modes of operation are actually allowed in more than one levels, and most of them are actually allowed in all of them. So on level 0, on a nude level 0 more or less, you would have this indication on the left side, and on the right side you will get this, what looks a bit like a ladder that has fallen over, but it is actually the grid. The grid without anything in it That is why it is called the UN mode of operation, the unfitted mode of operation. This is more or less telling the driver, you have to rely on yourself, you have to read the signals that are on the trackside and act accordingly. I am not doing anything else but monitoring your maximum vehicle speed and displaying temporary release information. Yeah, the problem is this is not a very safe thing to run under, because this is more or less relying on the driver, and the train does not have the information to interfere in any case that the driver misses a signal or falls unconscious or whatever, all that stuff. So this is not actually train control. So wouldn't it be nice if we could use our Class B installations, like our PZB magnets, in ETCS level 0? And yeah, we can. And this is why they invented this, the ETCS level STM, what is actually level 0 plus Class B installations. Or under baseline 3 it is no longer called STM but NTC. This is the right direction. STM stands for specific transmission module, that is this. That is the language of baseline 2. And baseline 3 talks about national train control, so that you know you are using the national train control more or less on your ETCS hardware on the train. So what do we do? Like, for example, the PZB magnets in Germany, we would use the PZB magnets via our STM, our special transmission or specific transmission module, and get the PZB information displayed on the display. You know, all that stuff that we have, all those videos and streams about PZB and how to handle it, with the yellow 1000 Hz and the red 500 Hz and the flashing 70 and 85 indicators, and all that stuff would happen on your standardized ETCS display. More or less, we're using the ETCS hardware with its very rudimentary functions on level 0 and are running the existing legacy systems as Class B systems through it. This would be like it is in Germany. In Switzerland, like we had this on our stream 2 weeks ago, we would have a bit of a hybrid system. If you already have the ETCS hardware, like the balises and the Euro loops in the track, and connected with the interlocking and stuff, and you run your legacy system like the Eurosignum and the Eurosub on the ETCS hardware, then you can use this hardware to feed your Class B information to the train via the balises and the balise receiver on the train. So you don't actually need a device that can read like the old-fashioned PZB magnets in Germany. This is why it is a bit yellow and it is a bit gray for the legacy systems. And how does that work? There is a standardized protocol for how this data that the balise transmits is structured, and there is one section, the so-called packet 44 in this telegram, that is reserved for national train control information. And for example, in the Javelin, you remember that for some part on the track you're running with miles being displayed on your display, miles per hour, and then after a certain switching point you are getting displayed kilometers per hour, because you are on the high speed line now and heading for the channel tunnel. And for example, in packet 44 you can have the information that the train is supposed to switch from miles per hour to kilometers per hour at this point. And also you can use this packet 44 to run your Class B information on it. So for example, the Eurosignum and Eurosub information that gets packaged into this packet 44. This is why sometimes It is also called Eurosignum P44 or package 44 because it runs on this package 44 in the telegram of this transponder, and then the train can process this information and display it accordingly to the driver, and she can react to it. Still, the driver is the one in charge. She has to look at the wayside signaling on the trackside signaling, and at the same time the train control data on the display, and drive the train accordingly. We had this video about how it looks in the game, Level STM, and now we know that the Luzern Sursee DLC at the moment is running on baseline 2 equipment, because it is calling it STM. And it is actually displaying this symbol for the level. I have nowhere found this icon actually in any operating rules, so maybe Rivet invented this, or it has been lost in the meantime. I have not found it anywhere. So in the game you will be displayed this if you are selecting your ETCS level STM in the game, and at the same time the game will display you the unfitted mode of operation for the STM level, and then you get the Eurosignum warnings on your display. All that is in the stream 2 weeks ago. You can watch it there if you have not watched it so far. Until baseline 3 there is an specific mode of operation for this level. It is called the SN System National, or National System Operating Mode, and it has this octagon displayed here, and I think it should display the level 0 marker here on the left side. Yeah, in the game it is like this when we're running ETCS level STM, and we are picking up the Eurosignum on the Euro balises here, and it is displaying the unfitted on the baseline 3. It would look like this most probably. That was level 0, what we are running today, and the level STM that we had 2 weeks ago. And now let's just go on to levels 1 and 2 and see how the cap signaling comes in, and we will have a stream next week where we look at how the cap signaling actually works and what you have to do. But today I want to complete the system of ETCS levels 0 to levels 2 so that we know what we are playing on. So ETCS level 1, full supervision. Full supervision is a mode of operation, and in the beginning the idea was that all ETCS level 1 plus runs on full supervision. And what does that mean? We're still not using this radio block center here except for talking to the driver, but we are no longer using wayside signaling. We are no longer using legacy class B systems. Now we are relying exclusively on our ETCS hardware. We are still having a driver on the train, and we are using the communication channel 1 through the balises and the Euro loops to get all the necessary information about track limits and signaling statuses in the computer on the train to be displayed on the display for the driver in the cap signaling system. And the only thing that is at the track in terms of signals are those block markers, so that the driver knows where one block starts and the other one ends, and where exactly she has to stop the train if she is ordered to stop the train by the cap signaling system on her display. What we still keep open is the line to talk to the driver, so that signaler and driver can actually talk in case of an emergency or an unforeseen situation, but that's it. This is all what we are using the GSM-R radio for. And on the display you will get this for level 1 on the left side. You will have those squares indicating that you are not getting a continuous feed of information from the signaler, but only at certain spots when you running past a balise or along a Euro loop. This is why we have this symbol here. And the mode of operation starts when you are starting the train from the cold and it has not picked up a balise yet. You will get this icon telling you staff responsible. Then you are limited usually to a very slow speed. In Switzerland it is, if I remember correctly, 40, and you are driving on site. This is like in the American system, restricted speed, because the train did not get any information. As soon as it passes the first balise and it gets the first data, we are switching from staff responsible to full supervision in the idea of ETCS level 1. And you can see the icons here. The I is crossed out, you are not monitored, and here you are fully monitored, fully supervised. This is what this icon is supposed to say. And then it switches to mode of operation FS, full supervision. And then you are fully supervised. And then you get all, as a driver, you get all your information about track limits and about signaling through your display. It's a bit like running your Javelin on the TVM 430. Also here, everything that is interesting for you, how fast you can go, whether you have to stop, whether you have to slow down, comes through your display. And the block markers are only that you know where one block ends in the real world actually and where you have to stop, in case the system orders you to stop. This is the general idea already on level 1. Full supervision, only cab signaling, no wayside signaling anymore, no local train control anymore. The problem is, obviously, you can imagine it is quite expensive to fit each and every line in your country with your new ETCS hardware, so that without a gap in between, the train can be fully supervised wherever it is going. And on the other hand, you have all your nice signals and Class B installations that are still functional and that you paid a lot of money for, and it is understandable that train operators might want to use that stuff instead of replacing everything on every not so important line with the new ETCS stuff. And this is why the train operators actually urged for something that is called level 1 limited supervision. We are still on level 1. We are still getting our data mainly through the Euro balises and the data, but not everywhere, but only on the more important points. And what do we do with the rest of the track that is not deemed that important? We rely again on the wayside signals, so that the driver in this case has to watch the signals and act accordingly, and for not confusing the driver, we get rid of our cab signaling system. So we are back to wayside signals that the driver has to drive the train according to, and we are reinstalling the use of our Class B stuff, so we can use our PZB or the Eurosignum, for example, that is running on the ETCS hardware, or it is running like the PZB stuff on the old legacy hardware. More or less, level 1 limited supervision is what we had for level 0, the STM NTC mode. We have that for level 1 here too. We can still run on level 1 for certain parts, but not really everywhere and all the time. So this is a cost saving thing for the railway carriers, and on the other hand maybe an economic thing, because they don't have to throw away all their signals and legacy hardware. But still we can make use of some of the ETCS features on the more important areas, so the train actually gets data from the balises and can stop the train if necessary, if the driver fails to react to the wayside signals, because the train knows on certain points at least about the limits and the signal status and can act accordingly. You would get displayed an icon about the mode of operation that looks like this, an eye with the 3 squares in it, and the squares on the end, and it is called LS limited supervision. And this only works under baseline 3. This is why I put the 3 in the blue circle here. And this was incorporated into the baseline 3 because the railway carriers wanted to have a cheaper system actually that allowed them to continue using their legacy installation at the same time being compatible with the ETCS stuff. It is not simulated in the game, the limited supervision. I think, to my knowledge, it is not simulated in any train simulator, not even on Sursee. From what I have seen, maybe I just did not find it there, but also the manual for Sursee tells us it is not implemented. So, back to our overview. Level 1, the idea was to start with cap signaling only, no wayside signal. It's everything running on Eurobalises for level 1 full supervision. It proved to be too expensive, so we got the cost-saving version of it in the limited supervision. In the game, we only have ETCS level 1 full supervision simulated, at least in a way, not the limited supervision. So what is there for level 2 then, if level 1 already in its basic idea was to make use of full cap signaling? So what is left for ETCS level 2? Level 2 also, obviously, from its main idea, has full supervision. And this is the level where the full supervision actually comes into reality then. Instead of relying on our hardware in the track, the balises, the infill balises, we also get lost, we get rid of our signals. We are not using our trackside signals anymore, obviously, because if we rely on cap signaling in level 1 full supervision, obviously on level 2 all the more so. Obviously we get lost of our legacy stuff, the class B system, and we get rid of most of the balises and Euroloops in the track. We are just not using them anymore. So how are we communicating with the driver that is still on the train? We are communicating with her via radio, GSM-R. So level 2 is actually the communication channel 2, running everything on the GSM-R via the radio block center. The rest, we have the balises for positioning, and we keep some balises so that signal control, for example, knows when a train has left a certain sector, and to make sure that the whole train has left the sector and not 1 or 2 cars have been left behind and forgotten, and so can be a danger for the next train coming into this sector. But the main communication between train and signaler on level 2 is supposed to run on the radio. Obviously we're still keeping the radio for talking to the driver if we need to, but the main idea is to run the data communication between the interlocking and the train on the GSM-R radio. On the display you would get this 2 for level 2, and now we have a continuous block underneath indicating that now the train is supposed to be in continuous contact with the signal control, what obviously requires you that you have a full radio coverage so that you do not run into black holes and lose the connection. What makes it important to fit your track with repeaters and whatever so that you can have a sufficient connection on the radio. And the modes of operation are actually the same as in level 1. Again, the all-seeing eye is for full supervision. And there is, at least the rules allow for it, also a level 2 limited supervision where you could incorporate your wayside signaling and the legacy class B train control stuff even in level 2. But as far as I know and as far as I can read on the internet, this is not used for that. So Level 1 is typically used as limited supervision, and level 2 is typically used for the full supervision for the main lines. We have seen this on the train control video a couple of weeks ago, where in my development slide you could see that for the high-speed rail in Switzerland, for example, the idea is to use level 2 full supervision, and for all the conventional rail that is not considered as important, you would run it on level 1 with limited supervision using the Eurosignum and Eurosub installations that are still in the tracks and the wayside signals. What is obviously the most obvious thing for the train simulator driver to see if you have to drive according to cab signaling, or if you can drive according to the signals that are on the track side. In case something breaks or some unforeseen thing happens, there is a mode also under level 2. It also applies to level 1. It looks like this. This is the eye of the driver now, and she has to pay attention. It means on site. In case that for some reason there is not enough information that the train can get on the radio or from wherever sources it can get data from, it can switch to on-site. That means, sorry, you have to take over. I don't have enough data to run this train safely, and then the driver has to slow down, typically 40, and has to drive on site to be ready to stop in front of any obstacle. This is what the Americans always call so great restricted speed. Yeah, that is level 2. As I said, there is also a level 2 limited supervision, but I left it out here because it is not a thing in reality and not in the game. There is an ETCS level 3 that they are working on at the moment. To my knowledge, there is no railway in the world that is using at the moment level 3 ETCS fully. The idea on level 3 obviously would be full supervision with the cab signaling as we know it, but the idea would be to get rid of the blocks. We get rid of the physical blocks that our track is divided into, so we don't need any block markers anymore. We also do not need anymore any devices that tell us if a train has left a certain block, obviously, because if there are no blocks we cannot use that anymore. And we are spacing our trains based on the radio data. If we actually know reliably enough where our trains are in the track, then we can tell the train that is running second actually how fast it can go without interfering, without getting too close to the next track, without the use of physical blocks. So that, and this is the ideal, we can go to absolute braking distance spacing or moving block spacing. That means that the distance between the trains is just so big that the second train can stop before hitting the first train, in case the first train hits a brick wall and does not move and stops to zero in an instant. And obviously this allows the maximum of trains crammed on the tracks. And this is the idea of level 3 here. It is not implemented, so there are different approaches to that. There is a thing that is called ERTMS regional. Yeah, like CBTC. Actually, this would be one implementation of a communication-based train control here. Obviously there might be differences in the actual program, but I think this is the idea of running everything on the radio, all the spacing, no physical blocks anymore. There is one railway line in Sweden, to my knowledge, where they invented this for the ERTMS regional, what is a cost-saving version of the level 3, where everything runs on the radio. and there is no other train control system anymore, but there are still wayside signals in this ERTMS regional system. I have no sources how it is actually done and how it works, but from what I have read, they are still using the wayside signals, so not a full cap signaling system here. But the idea and why it is put under ETCS level 3, I guess, is because it is radio based, so that would be CBTC, I guess. Communication based train control. No trackside equipment, no physical blocks, just placing the trains on the data that the train sent you by radio, and you are sending back the information for the train. The problem is obviously to make it reliable enough, because with radio you're always in the problem that you can lose contact, that actually the train can make a mistake and actually be closer to the other train than it thought, and then mayhem can occur. And to make this safe enough, this is not so easy, but they are working on it. On the ERTMS regional, it is used for quite slow speed lines, as far as I know. It is not only implemented in Sweden, I think in Italy they talked about implementing it on some lines where trains are not running that fast. Yeah, but you can see it is the communication based train control is not at the moment safe enough to actually run high speed trains, from what I get from the internet. So it's only a thing for minor railways. Then there is a thing like ETCS hybrid level 3, would still use blocks, physical blocks, but for certain priority trains they can get virtual fixed blocks in between, so that you can, for example, like push high-speed passenger trains faster through the track than regular trains that cannot do that. That would be a hybrid solution where some trains can run in those virtual blocks, others have to rely on the normal stuff. And obviously then there are ideas about using GNSS, so global navigation satellite systems, to position the train so that we do not longer need to use the balises in the track, and we get our positioning data reliably enough from the satellites. So those are the ideas that are discussed on level 3. Since this is not actually a thing in reality, it obviously cannot be a thing in the simulator, and it isn't. But I thought it might be interesting to look at it. There are also discussions about a level 4 of ETCS that is actually based on that, and I'm not totally sure what this is supposed to be. Then they are talking about virtual coupling and convoys of trains, so that you actually don't have a braking distance between the trains anymore, but running them virtually coupled or whatever. But this is the future. What is implemented actually is level 1 and level 2. So let's summarize. I have built a matrix for what we use. If we use only trackside signaling, if we use trackside signaling and the legacy stuff, the Class B train control systems like PZB or Eurosignal, or if you're using the cap signaling that comes with the ETCS. For level 0, where we don't actually get additional data in the train. For level 1, where we get our data mainly through the balises, as discussed. And for level 2, where we get our data mainly via radio. So, for level 0, using trackside signaling and the legacy system. For that we have the so-called Level STM, what is not actually a level, but it is a mode of operation within the level 0 that allows us to use and rely on the legacy train control system. National system in baseline 3, STM in baseline 2. And there on level 0, obviously we cannot use cap signaling because we don't have the data for it. The train cannot signal us anything on the display because the train does not know. For level 1, we have discussed that using trackside signaling and the legacy system works in the mode of operation limited supervision, and that is actually a thing. If you read the rules of operation for the Swiss railway or the corresponding directive for the Deutsche Bahn, for example, you can always see that on level 1 stuff they are using the limited supervision. Obviously the general idea was to use full supervision here and the cap signaling system, and the rules still allow it, but it is not done in reality because it is too expensive for the minor railways. Whereas on level 2 there is also a thing for limited supervision, but it is not done. Here we go for full supervision. This is why sometimes you can read it like on ETCS level 1 you don't have cap signaling, and on level 2 you have cap signaling. This is not necessarily so, but in real life it is like that. Other modes where we have to rely on the trackside signaling alone without the class B systems, for example. On a naked level 0 we would have the mode of operation unfitted, but this is something that should not be used. This is not safe enough to actually run a train with passengers in it or freight in it. The mode of operation exists, but you should not use it in real life. While as under level 1 and level 2 we have the staff responsible and on-site mode of operations, but those are only for the limited use where either the train is just starting its journey until it gets to the first balise, then the driver, she is responsible as staff and has to act according to trackside signaling alone, and in case something goes wrong and we have to run our train under the restricted speed on site, then it is up to the driver and obviously limited to very, very slow speeds so that nothing can happen here. So those are the modes of operation that can happen in those levels, and then you would be using trackside signaling alone, trackside signaling and the legacy system, or actually the cap signaling. And what of this is implemented in the Luzern Sursee? We have seen that on the stream 2 weeks ago. The Level STM baseline 2 is implemented. We can use at least the Eurosignum, not the Eurosub, but the Eurosignum under Level STM, using still trackside signals and using our Eurosignum as a Class B system that is running on the ETCS balises. We have discussed that. You can watch that stream if you want to know more about this. This is implemented. What is also implemented is the naked level 0 that we are running just now, and we are getting always the unfitted. So more or less we are left alone with the train and the signals, and everyone is relying on us as the driver to not misinterpret the signals and to act according to what they are saying. This is implemented in the DLC, and this is what we are doing today. As I have said, the level 0 in the game actually has this functionality that is not only monitoring the maximum allowed speed for the train, the 160, but it is also monitoring speed limits of 100 kilometers and above. I have nowhere found any hint that level 0 can do that. I can't imagine how level 0 would do that, because at any point level 0 would have to pick up the data to know what speed limit is actually running on the certain part of track. So it would have to read balises. So I don't know if this is purely fictitious and invented by Rivet Games, or if that is actually something that has been forgotten since then. So if you know anything about it, please let me know in the comments. But I suspect that this was just invented by Rivet because the nude level 0 only monitoring the train to 160, what it cannot exceed because of its limiter that is inbound, is a bit boring. So maybe this is the reason for how it works in the game. And the next thing that we have in the game is this, the full supervision on level 1. As we know, this is not actually used in real life, but it is a viable mode of operation according to the ETCS rules. So the full supervision with cap signaling on level 1, we will have a look at this next week on Sunday, and we will discuss how the display tells you what to do and how the cap signaling under this level and mode of operation works. But we have to keep in mind this is something that is actually not done in real life. So the two things that are done in real life, the limited supervision on ETCS level 1 is not simulated in the game, what I understand totally, because it is hard to simulate, because here comes back in the fragmentation that we actually set out to battle by inventing the ETCS. Because with using the national class B systems within the level 1, obviously needs to adapt to the class B system in question. So we have ETCS level 1 limited supervision Germany, and we have ETCS level 1 limited supervision Switzerland, and here comes the fragmentation back in that we wanted to battle. So you can discuss whether we won a lot now, but at least we have the hardware that is unified here and the displays, and so that there is the possibility to get more unification here again. On the ETCS level 2 we have the full supervision. This is what actually should be simulated here, not the level 1 full supervision but the level 2 full supervision, not picking up the data from the balise but from the GSM-R, but obviously we all know that in the game the GSM-R radio is not simulated. So it makes sense that Rivet Games went for this here, and I'm actually quite happy that they did it, because they are the only ones that had the courage to do it. TTG did not implement any ETCS stuff, but it left it to Rivet Games. And we will see. There are some issues with it, especially with the cap signaling system, and it is very limited to this little DLC here. But all in all, kudos that they went for it and did it, because there is not a lot of stuff that they can rely on. So that's that, I think. Yeah, this is also in the game, the fourth circle here. The staff responsible when you start your journey before hitting the first balise. You can see that on your cap. We will see that next week when we look at the level 1. The on-site is not simulated, but the staff responsible works. Or at least at the on-site I've never seen it, and I can't imagine how this can be simulated in the game, but the staff responsible mode of operation, that works until we hit the first balise. Yes, the other thing is for the end of the stream when we are in Luzern. Thank you so much for staying with me for this long presentation about ETCS. I knew that it would be a bit tiresome and longish, but I thought it best to actually go through the whole concept in one go and use the nude level 0 for that. And if you know more about ETCS, if you think anything that I said was wrong or not complete enough, please leave it in the comments. I'm always eager to learn more about it and put it into the system that I worked out on out of all the sources that I read. Okay, we can go on driving our train. Here on the display, the indicator for level 0, and here the indicator for unfitted. Here the level, here the mode of operation. So on our way to Rothenburg, we will again... Oh! Thank you for reminding me. Thank you for reminding me of that. I misclicked on my OBS. So again, this is where the level is indicated, level 0 here, and this is where the mode of operation is indicated, the unfitted track. It is very small, I know, but still it is there. So what I want to do here, we are now running in 120 limit, and before we get to Rothenburg, I want to slowly go above that limit so that we can see once more how the train reacts and applies a penalty brake in our probably fictitious nude level 0 ETCS by Rivet Games. We are at 110, climbing, running uphill, so we are not climbing so fast. Now 120, 121, 122, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, boof! So at 7 too fast, 7 over limit, the train applied the penalty brake, the indicator came on. Again, we will see whether the train recovers on its own. I just leave everything as it is. The train brake is in release. This is on max power. Train grinds to a stop. Indicator goes out or goes off. We're losing pressure, so the train is recovering on its own. I don't think that this should be like this in real life, or at least I would not build a system that works like this, because one reason for the driver not reacting to going above limit is that the driver for some reason fell unconscious, and then it is not a good idea that the train recovers on its own without the driver doing anything, because then this just repeats itself. The trains get stopped, the train starts again, the train speeds, the train gets stopped, and so on. I don't think that this should be like this. Normally, when recovering this train for an emergency brake application, you would have to put the throttle to 0, what makes sense so that the train does not start again, and then put the train brakes into emergency, and then you can release the train brakes again and apply throttle anew. Say hello to the big G's. Now I'm almost a bit late on the brakes. To stop for Rothenburg. Das untere Futterhaus. So, obviously we are late because of all of our emergency brakes and penalty brakes. But nevertheless, on the next part of the track, what I wanted to show you is that there is one spot, one speed changing point where the brake curves are not modeled correctly in the DLC. At least I make so bold in claiming that they are not modeled correctly, because we will see that next week also when we're doing the cap signaling system. We will get a penalty brake out of the blue, although we are still running in a much higher speed limit. So we are now in a 110 limit starting here, and then the limit will drop to 90 according to the signage at the roadside. So I will accelerate to the 120 here. I have to do that a bit harder because otherwise we do not have enough track. And then I will let the train coast at the 110 or close to the 110. You can see our speed on the bottom. We're passing a signal. And now you can see the sign here announcing the reduction in 90. And before we even get to the announcement speed, we got a penalty brake application for being too fast. On the cap signaling system you can see how the limit that we are controlled to drops from 110 to 90 in an instant. After that it climbs back to whatever. So here the brake curves, the speed limits are not properly modeled in the game. You can still see we are still in a 110 limit, and we have more than enough time to slow down to the 90 that is incoming, I can tell you that. And still at this point already we got our penalty brake application for violating the 90 that cannot have started yet. So obviously you could always say, yeah, maybe you were already in the brake curve, but we weren't in the brake curve. I can prove that next week when we look at the cap signaling system, because on the cap signaling system you get shown when you enter the brake curve. And we weren't. We don't have to stop here. And here you can see is the commandment sign for this 90 reduction. Here you can see the balises, by the way, those yellow things in the track that always say hello. Since we are below the 100 kilometers now, we will not get a penalty brake anymore for the rest of the track. You remember here's that piece where we run across that bridge and the 80 limit is inbleeding in our 90 limit track. And I want to use that to demonstrate that with 80 and 90 we don't get penalty brakes from the Level 0 Rivet Games variant. Here again, since we have daylight today, now this little reduction to 80 at the switch is incoming. The switch, you can see it here. It is still in front of us, but we're almost there. Now we're at the switch. Here we are in the reduction to 80. Now we are out of it. Train has to run its full length. Train went the full length, we are out of it. We did not get any penalty brake, even though we were at least a bit. Oh, what did I do? I did not want to stop here. That was a mistake. We can just go on. Just slow down to 85. Here's the announcement of the 85. And here the commandment sign for the 85. And we have to stop down there, so again I was too late on the brakes. So don't judge me for my braking today. The focus is on a different thing. It is most probably a test train anyway, with no passengers that can fall out of their seats. Well, so the last thing that I have on my list for the stream today is back to level L signaling. How you can get signaled that you are running across a switch with a slower speed limit than the line usually has. We know that in all signaling systems, typically we will get warned by the signals and slowed down by the signals, so that we know we are running across a switch. We will be running across a switch. We can already see that here. We have an 80 limit starting from this station here, no, an 85 limit, and then we are going across a switch with a 60 limit, that is this section here. And then we are back to a 80 limit until we get to the Luzern station area with a 40 limit. So this reduction to 60 that is due to a switch should typically be signaled, so that the driver knows that this that he is or she is routed across the switch and has to slow down the train. And this is and can be done by signals. But what will we get? I will actually drive very slowly so that we all can see what signals we get in preparation for that part. The first thing that we get is a green diagonally over green signal that looks like a distance signal. And from what we see on the plate, I don't know if you can see it, it has a number and it has 2 asterisks on it, telling us that this is a repeater. It is actually repeating the aspect that we already got from our system N signal at the exit of the station that we started from. But so far so good. Actually not something that is spectacular. Whether that is a full-blown distance signal or a repeater is not so important for us. We should assume that we can go on at the next signal with full line speed. But now pay attention to the next signal that we are getting. It is a single green, what is nice. Freie Fahrt, we can go line speed, but look underneath. Underneath there is a distance signal, and the distance signal is dark. It is not also green, but it is dark, and that is a problem. Because a dark signal, we all know that, is probably or possibly a failed signal, a signal with broken lamps or whatever. And in most signaling system there is a general rule of treating failed signals, dark signals, unless they are marked as irrelevant to treat them with the worst possible aspect that they can show. And for a distance signal, this would be, we have to treat it like an orange distance signal. Two orange lights next to each other, indicating that the next main signal will be red. Now here the branching line is coming in. On the shower express scenario, we would be going across this switch, I think, on the other, or maybe not. At least that would have been a possibility to switch over, but we're not switching over here. Well, okay. We have seen a dark distance signal. Actually are supposed to expect that the next main signal is red. But what do we get for the next signal? Again, something that looks like a distance signal. And if you have a look on the plate here, the two asterisks, maybe it was possible to see it here, it is a repeater. So now this repeats the dark signal, and we know, okay, no problem. It was a green distance signal in the first place. I don't know exactly if a train driver in real life can start accelerating now, because he knows, okay, everything is good. That was the repeated signal, so it was not actually a dark signal, it was a green one. But then we are passing on another one, and you can see the main signal is dead. The main signal is dark. We have a green distance signal, but now it might have changed since we passed it. Now it switched to red, what is okay because we passed it. But before we passed it, it was dead. It was all black. And an all black main signal we have to treat as a red one. And this is why I hit the emergency brake at once. Because we can never know if we are going across this switch that we are passing a signal of danger, actually. Again, the presentation in the last part of it. Here. We are supposed to go across a switch. And this switch is limited to 60. We had this on the last stream already. The proper aspect for that would be green over green, limiting us to 60, announced by a distance signal with yellow over green, diagonally over green, announcing this aspect. Then we knew that we are supposed to run across a switch that is limited to 60 here. We have seen that in the shower express scenario, this signal here is actually, so the green one, the signal here is actually implemented. We can see it, but it does not have the corresponding distance signal to it. Excuse me. But what do we get? We got this on the repeater, green over green, announcing on the next main signal there will be freie Fahrt, there will be a clear signal. Then we actually got this, a clear signal, with a dead distance signal. We assume, okay, it is dead. We have to assume the worst. It is showing orange, orange, meaning the next main signal is dead too. Then we get a repeater telling us, okay, I'm repeating what the distance signal said. It was announcing freie Fahrt. Next main signal will be green. Okay, then we relaxed and thought everything is okay. We can go by this repeater. And then we got this. We got a dead black main signal with a distance signal announcing freie Fahrt on the next signal. According to the rules, we have to treat this as a red signal. A red signal should never have announcing freie Fahrt, green over green aspect on the distance signal that is mounted to the same post. But nevertheless, to be safe, to be secure, we would have to treat this as a red signal, stop the train at once and contact the signaler and ask what is going on and what we are supposed to do, because there is obviously some malfunction here. And the rules are very clear about this. In German, this is the number 111, paragraph 2 of the Fahrdienstvorschriften module R300.2, if you want to read it up. Signale, die entgegen den Vorschriften nicht beleuchtet sind oder sich in zweifelhafter Stellung befinden, sind als haltzeigende Signale zu betrachten. Sinngemäß sind Vorsignale als Warnung zeigend zu betrachten. I tried to translate this. Signals that are contrary to regulations, not illuminated or displaying a doubtful aspect are to be treated as signals showing halt. Accordingly, distance signals are to be treated as showing warning. This is what we did, and this translated into graphics. A distance signal that is black is read as an orange signal, and a dead main signal is read as a red main signal. Also a combined signal. We have seen those signals not in the game but on my presentations. It looks like a distance signal because it is so square, but it has this sign that tells us this is a main signal nevertheless. And those signals need to be treated as red signals for safety reasons. This is why I yanked in the emergency brake here. And what would I have to do now? I would have to contact the signaler. Where is my phone? Here it is. Signaler, what is up? And he says, okay, proceed as signals indicate. That is always good if the signals are black and the signal tells you proceed as signals indicate. You totally know what you have to do. Well, CD Radar says, I can confirm this is the same in the Czech Republic on railway and also metro. Thank you very much for this confirmation. It is the only sensible thing to do. Hunterius 96 said, I think it is the same in Bulgaria. Wonderful, thank you for this input. It is the only reasonable thing to do. If the signal is black or is showing something, oh yeah, this presentation is still on the screen. I remove it. Thank you very much. It is the only sensible thing to do. If the signal is black and dark, stop, call the signaler, ask what you are supposed to do. Always assume the worst, err on the safe side. We contacted the signaler. Signaler said, okay, yeah, we know about it. You can just go home on site first, and then what signals indicate. Since I yanked in the emergency brake manually, the train is not recovering on its own. The indicator is still on. So the emergency brake is here. In this funny contraption, it is still 100% on. We have to put that back to 0% so that we can recover, and then move the throttle to 0. We already have this. Put the train brakes into emergency for a second, out of emergency. Then the indicator goes off and we can release the brakes. We can hear the brake cylinders. What does Hunterius say? Also, we use some German machines and laws and rules in the railway since 1864, so that is great. Well, I've actually been to Bulgaria, but I have not traveled on a train there, only by bus. Would have been interesting. The German machines since 1864. That is priceless. You have a nephew and a godchild in Germany. Great. Well, in my opinion, there is always no reason why people from one country should not like and love people from other countries. So I'm happy to hear that. So, we are across the switch. We can accelerate to 80 again. You admire the Germans because they've helped us during the war and also they are disciplined. Some are. Well, I liked Bulgaria very much. And I found some friends there. So, now we have to prepare for the slowing down. Thank you very much. Now I have a friend in Czechia and you have one more friend in Germany. Here's where the reduction to 40 starts when driving into the station. I always think here they could actually have given us some signals that slow us down to 40 because, well, it is not necessary because there are the signs. Do I have a custom INI for TSW 3 for graphics? Yes, I have a custom INI. More or less one that I copied from the forums. I will try to send it to you. Do you have any? Are you on my Discord server for any chance? Then I can send it most easily. Nope. AJ, do you know how we can send this here, maybe on the chat? Okay, then I will send it gladly. So what my custom INI does more or less is enhancing the distance that you can see. Yes, there is a Discord server. Alright, we are home. What did you say, AJ? In that case, the question to me becomes avoid and I crawl back into the dark corners of observation. Oh yeah, I've seen that there has been a message. I will take care of this as soon as we finish the stream. Then I will send you my custom INI and you can check it out if it works for you. And the radar, if you want, I can send you an invite to my Discord server if you want. I'd be happy to have you on it. Thank you very much, guys, for staying with me during this not so easy stream with all the theory about ETCS. And next week we will go back to driving this train in not level 0 but level 1, and then we will get to all the cab signaling here. To finish the service I have to allow the passengers to get off the train. Oh nice. This is where the camera ended up to be. And now I have to lock the doors again so that we can finish that up. Thank you very much and take care, have a good time and see you next week.